Grahika Shakti Ramakrishna Sthita Hiya Sarva Vidya Surupam Stam Sharadam Pranamamyaham. So we are discovering two apparently contrasting dimensions of Mother's personality and teachings. Right now I shall conclude one aspect, how Mother taught as a conventional nun, a teacher, a spiritual preceptor. And then I shall take up how Mother interacted with her Western disciples and admirers. So that will give us a totally different dimension of Mother's personality. So here I'm reading from a short article recorded by an anonymous devotee. So the devotee writes, "Once I had wanted to take my grandmother on a pilgrimage, but as the time was inauspicious, my grandmother refused to start." So now we can see this picture in ancient Indian tradition. They consider certain times as auspicious for rituals, pilgrimage, visiting temples, fire sacrifices, puja, and so on. And how Mother approached this subject. It has a great relevance in our spiritual life, as we are going to find out. I referred the matter to the Holy Mother for her guidance. That is, the grandmother, the devotee's grandmother, refused to start on a pilgrimage at a time because she thought it was inauspicious. I mean, the position of the stars, constellation of stars, in an inauspicious position, so you should not start on something. It's called Rahu Kala. It is inauspicious time. It's an old conventional belief. There is some truth in it, but beyond a limit, it has no meaning. At the spiritual realm, it has no meaning. So that's what we are going to find out from Mother's words. So Mother replied, "Son," or she is a gentleman, "some say that a man loses the merits he has already earned if he visits a pilgrim center at an inauspicious time. But it is wise to perform all holy acts without much delay." So there is a great common sense here. If you want to do something good, better don't delay, do it immediately. Don't wait for an auspicious time to come. But if there is something that we have to do which we are not sure about its auspiciousness, maybe we may have to take an unpleasant decision, which is not something urgent in our own professional life. If there is a scope for delay, better postpone it. Though if we have the means, and if we want to help somebody, if we want to some financial help or any other kind of help, whatever it may be, then we may decide later on not to help the person. So we may be losing the good merit of doing something charitable, something good for others. So if it's a good action, better do it immediately. Don't worry about the auspiciousness or inauspiciousness of time. But if it is something which may not be apparently very good, then better delay. So the devotee writes, "I could not satisfactorily comprehend her meaning, and so expressed my doubt to her once again. I specifically asked her what I should do in my present circumstances." So Mother said, "People no doubt say that pilgrimages during inauspicious times are prohibited. It's an old custom, conventions. People consult astrologers before they undertake some important event, especially religious ceremony. That's old customs in India. One can postpone a holy duty out of considerations of time, but look, Death takes no notice of time. Since death has no fixed hours, one should perform holy duties as soon as an opportunity comes or as soon as the thought emerges in our mind. Now, this is a very, very important message that my mother gives, because Holy Mother expressed her ideas again and again. There is a slow journey from faith to experience. So we may read a book, we may listen to some lectures, we may be highly impressed and convinced of some higher spiritual ideas. So we want it can have a change in our attitudes and tastes. But still, even now, it is only a wonderful idea or a concept. There is some distance we have to travel from conviction and faith to our own experience. For covering that distance, we have to perform rituals. And rituals are needed, but rituals do not constitute the end of a spiritual journey. So mechanical rituals are needed, just as we have to memorize alphabet when we go to primary school or kindergarten, because without learning the alphabet, we won't be able to read anything. But we won't stop there. So there is a slow evolution from mechanical, it's called Vaidhi Bhakti, to Para Bhakti. That is old Sanskrit language. Vidhi means injunctions, rules, regulations, conventions laid down in scriptures. That is called Vidhi. So Vaidhi means certain practices which are performed according to certain injunctions in the canonical literature. So we perform that. By performing those rituals, actually we are accumulating a lot of spiritual wealth, impressions, vasanas and samskaras, which are necessary for us to cover the distance from a concept to our own experience, from an idea to the real experience in our own life. So for that, pilgrimages are necessary, reading scriptures are necessary, there's no doubt about it, but there should not be an end in itself. So Holy Mother used to refer to this higher devotion in Sanskrit, Para Bhakti. Para Bhakti means when we reach a point where our mind automatically goes to God without any effort, without any labor on our part, spontaneously, naturally, effortlessly, then we don't need rituals. But till then, we have to follow certain traditions, because traditional practices save us from doing something wrong, something which may be untested. Because what is tradition? Tradition is the old royal highway, which are being used by our forefathers, the great sages and saints and devotees in the past. So they have traveled, thousands of them, for thousands of years. So it's like a royal freeway, highway. So when we follow that road, we are sure to reach the goal, but not immediately. It may take some time. So Holy Mother used to say, traditional rituals like pilgrimages, other charitable activities, karma yoga, all these are essential because they are time-tested paths, ways and means and methods which are being used and proved to be genuine, which have helped many great sages in the past. So that itself is a proof of their authenticity. Now after this, I am going to discuss an entirely different subject that is much more relevant to our times and maybe little or maybe greater contemporary relevance, so that may be quite appropriate. So I shall read from a book. The book is Sri Sharada Devi and Her Divine Play. I am not going to read the whole book, just a few portions and trying to explain the implications. Now, as we know, uh, a large number of Western devotees, especially women devotees, Sister Nivedita, Josephine MacLeod. Sister Nivedita was an Irish woman, a revolutionary, supposed to be the most wonderful Western disciple the Vedanta movement ever had. And Sarah Bull, and Sister Devamata, and Betty Leggett, and quite a good number of them. Now, they all came to meet Mother. And from America, and Sister Nivedita, of course, she was born in Ireland. She came to London. From London, she went to India. Now, when these Western women met Mother, something interesting happened. Mother did not know their language, and they did not know Mother's language. Very often, they had to speak in some kind of transcendental, invisible language, inaudible language. But it really worked. So even Swami Vivekananda was very apprehensive, somewhat skeptical about allowing Sister Nivedita to come to India. That is in the last decade of 19th century. And she was a firebrand revolutionary. Her ancestors have participated in the Irish land question. The Ireland was a northern Ireland, Catholic country. It's prolonged, centuries-old confrontation, warfare, confrontation with British Parliament, the Protestant, Anglican society of the rest of Britain. So she was actually born in a social situation where a lady had to be a firebrand, absolutely ruthless and bold and blunt to assert her identity. So that kind of aggressiveness, not in a very negative sense, the feminine assertiveness and aggressiveness, that characterized Sister Nivedita's approach. And if you want to know a little more about this, the word aggressive Hinduism was coined by an Irish lady who came before Sister Nivedita to India. Her name was Annie Besant, and she was a leader of the Theosophical movement. And she was a great lover of India. Everything about India was sacred for her. To such an extent that when she first landed in Bombay, she came by ship, of course, she just came out and lay flat on the soil, and I have come back to in her own language, Karma Bhumi, that Sanskrit word she used, because she was familiar with the writings of the Theosophical movement. She was familiar with the writings of Colonel Corbett and, of course, Madame Blavatsky. Excuse me? Yeah.
Alcott, did you mention Colonel Alcott?
And also Madame Blavatsky. She was she was inspired by Blavatsky. She was the icon of Theosophical movement, which actually started in the United States, in New York, most probably in 1874, around that time. A little later, I think
1875, I think?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. So it was actually started in the East Coast, in New York. So Blavatsky was a great believer in some kind of a bit exotic Indian mystical tradition. Not very rational, but that's what she understood. And she influenced this firebrand great orator. Her name was Annie Besant. And if you want to know a little about Annie Besant, I can quote from her letter. When Gandhi started his pacifist movement, non-violence, civic disobedience, fasting, and then breaking the civil laws. That is something she opposed. So she wrote, like, Mr. Gandhi, you are doing a great wrong. That's a sentence from the opening letter. Mr. Gandhi, you are doing a great wrong, told in British English. So that was the kind of person Annie Besant was. And she was the one who coined aggressive Hinduism, and it was taken up by the Sister Nivedita. who was inspired by Vivekananda, she wrote an article on aggressive Hinduism. So, this is the background. Now, this lady, when she came to Calcutta, Vivekananda was a bit skeptical how she could meet and understand Holy Mother, who spoke no English, was born in a very backward village in Calcutta, who was not educated even by conventional local standards. So, but when she entered the room, she never looked back. She felt her own mother was sitting there. And mother felt her own child was entering the room. So I can read that particular part, In 98, on 22nd May, Sister Nivedita wrote to her friend, Mrs. Eric Hammond in London. So the letter tells us something about Sister Nivedita's meeting Holy Mother. And it says a lot about Holy Mother, in fact. I have often thought that I ought to tell you about the lady who was the wife of Sri Ramakrishna, Sharada Devi, as her name is. To begin with, she is dressed in a white cotton cloth like any other Hindu widow under 50. This cloth goes around the waist and forms a skirt, and then it passes around the body and over the head like a nun's veil. That's what she writes. Now, her relationship. Holy Mother's relationship with Nivedita was sweet and touching, yet awe-inspiring. From the very beginning, Nivedita occupied a special place in Holy Mother's heart. During Nivedita's first visit to Holy Mother, Swamiji was a bit apprehensive and skeptical. Holy Mother had been born and brought up in an Orthodox Brahmin family in a village. She was not familiar with Western etiquette, and she did not know English. How would she receive his Western disciples, Vivekananda's Western disciples? Swamiji sent his disciple Swami Swarupananda as an interpreter. When Swarupananda brought Nivedita to Holy Mother, she asked her name. Nivedita replied, "My name is Miss Margaret Elizabeth Noble." Swarupananda translated Holy Mother's Bengali. "My child, I shall not be able to utter such a long name. I will call you Cookie." It's a little baby. And Nivedita said joyfully, "Yes, yes, I am mother's baby." And when she wrote later on letters in English, which somebody translated to mother, she, "Oh, your dear Cookie," that's how he signed herself. Now, what I mean to say, she then went to Swamiji and said, "Mother blessed me touching my head, allowed me to bow down and touch her feet, offered prasad, and said she would call me Cookie." Now, what I want to say is there some invisible realm where two civilizations can meet in the language of silence? That's what really happened here. Now, at the level of culture and civilization, habits and customs, nationality and race, there cannot be complete harmony very often. But there is another realm, the transcendental realm of spirituality, and that communicates in the language of silence. That's why Romain Rolland, the French novelist, he was a Nobel Prize winner. He also wrote extensively about Holy Mother. So Miss McLeod, an American woman, told Romain Rolland about Holy Mother herself, saying, "The Holy Mother had a natural affinity with Western women, able to speak with them on any subject, had a simplicity, a fineness, a delightful disposition." So what I'm trying to say is this, beyond the conventional understanding of civilizational discourses, conversations, cultural conversations. There is another realm that is beyond the conventional feminist language and paradigms, So you find, even today, if you go to India, there are not many feminist leaders in India who understand Holy Mother. And that should be kept in mind to fully appreciate, to be able to fully appreciate the greatness of these Western women. These Western women went at the turn of 20th century, the beginning of 20th century. Mother passed away in 1920. She was born in December 23rd in 1853, passed away in 1920, just after the First World War. So many of these Western women, when they went to India, they instinctively had the feeling that they are confronting an entirely different, an alternate paradigm in feminism, if we use the technical word, which may not be very appropriate, in fact. So there is a spiritual possibility for feminism, where there is no aggression or assertiveness or a kind of extreme competition or rivalry. Because in mother's presence, you don't fight. No civilized person will fight. And everyone will have to obey, everyone will have to come down. Now, to fully understand Holy Mother's personality, we should know a little about India's own past, especially in the field of feminism. If you look at Indian history, you can very easily see there were many ups and downs. There was not always a straight-cut progression in a straight line. If you go to the Upanishadic period or the early Vedic period, you'll be surprised. Sacred thread ceremony was recommended for girls, and a father who does not make arrangement for Vedic education for his female children was considered to be uncultured, uncivilized in Vedic society. So Manu has this statement, Yatra naristu pujante remande tatra devataha yatra edastu na pujante tatra sarva aphala kriyaha. This is the meaning. Now, I should expound this verse from Manu to fully do justice to the Vedic concept of women. And it is very important to understand that to really appreciate mother's grandeur. As a mother who was just a mother, nothing less, nothing more. She did not speak the common language of these great, well-educated, highly assertive, extremely civilized, well-mannered, but again very assertive Western women who came to meet Holy Mother. And they did not feel the need to assert their identity, because they confronted feminism of a different quality and different type. So to understand that, I should expound this particular verse from Manu. So Manu says, wherever women are respected and honored, there even gods are pleased. So gods should be understood, roughly speaking, correspond to angels, not monotheistic God, capital letter G. It's angels. So the angels in heaven are pleased where women are honored. Etra edastu na pujyante, where and when women are not honored and respected. Tatra sarva aphala kriya. There, whatever you do, whatever religious ritual you perform, meditation, japa, or any of these, they become totally fruitless. So, tatra sarva aphala kriya. This is the meaning here. So, this is the picture. So, you find there was a great woman devotee in San Francisco. She was a disciple of Swami Ashokananda, and her name was Miss Mary Louise Burke, and she proudly assumed the name Gargi. And Gargi was one of the most learned exponents of Vedanta in the early Vedic age. So you find in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, to get an idea of the other side of Indian feminism, you find in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there are two Gargi Brahmanams, in which Gargi argues, engages in some kind of a debate on Vedantic subjects. On one occasion with Yajnavalkya. Now Yajnavalkya was the most learned philosopher of those days. So hundreds of Vedic scholars assembling in a court, in the court of Emperor Janaka. And in that verse you find in the mantras, Ete Brahmanaha Gandhara Deshiyaha Atra Agataha, you find. So these learned scholars are coming from today's Kandahar, today's Afghanistan. It's part of the ancient Vedic culture geographically. And they are engaging in a debate with whom? With Gargi. And she was one of the greatest exponents of Vedanta in Vedic times. Also Maitreyi, there are many, quite a few. Some of the greatest characters, some of the grandest characters in the Mahabharata and Ramayana are ladies, actually. So many of them are either great wives or great mothers. That's why in Indian tradition you find no man ever achieved anything or accomplished anything great in his life unless she has the backing support of a chaste wife or a saintly mother. Either the support of a wife or the blessings of a mother. Without this, no man ever accomplished anything in his life. This should be kept in mind when we understand Holy Mother. So Holy Mother was actually presenting this unique aspect of the ancient Vedic sages who were women like Gargi, Maitreyi, Savitri, Damayanti, Kunti and so on. So this should be kept in mind when we read about Holy Mother. That's why I just read about this. Now, there was another very interesting episode which I am going to quote. There was a great nun in the Saradamat. Her name was Bharati Prana Sarala. She was a student at Sister Nivedida's school. A school started by Nivedita in Calcutta. Now what she did there, she got inspiration from Holy Mother. And she got inspiration and blessings from Holy Mother to start women education centers in Calcutta. So this lady, coming from Ireland, who had settled in London, who had this background, she was a teacher and she was well known as some kind of a very, very assertive, aggressive, but extremely spiritual, highly evolved, independent person. So when she went to Calcutta, she had to face opposition from the British government. They considered her as some kind of an aberration. But she used some of her strongest terms in criticizing the colonial attitude of the British rulers of those days in Calcutta. So Bharati Prana writes, she was a student in Sister Nivedita's school. She recalled a memorable visit that Sister Nivedita paid to Holy Mother in Udbodhana office. That's the place where she lived, an old house. Whenever Sister Nivedita visited the mother, I watched her sit absorbed for a long time in front of the mother. She would bow down to the mother with full frustration, and an indescribable wave of bliss will flow over her entire face. She seemed a joyful child closely looking at the face of her mother. Once the mother presented Sister with a palm leaf fan that had woolen face around the edges, which she had made herself. Receiving that fan from the mother's hand, she was beside herself and exclaimed, "This fan has been made by Mata Devi and she has given it to me." Now, what I want to drive home is beyond the cultural or national or racial or civilizational conflicts and variations and contradictions you find, at one level, it is possible for the whole world to become united. So this aspect, not in the form of a formal interfaith conference, not interfaith dialogue, interreligious dialogue, the pure spirituality emerging from a saint who was essentially the symbol of the rural India of those days. That's what you find in Holy Mother's character. Now, I refer to one interesting incident, how Mother understood something, how she developed a kind of natural appreciation for other religious and cultural traditions. There is a very interesting incident episode from her life. A few days after Nivedita's death, Sister Christine and Sister Sudhira, a co-worker, came to see Holy Mother from Nivedita's school. Remembering the close relationship Nivedita and Christine, Holy Mother said to Sudhira, "Oh, they live together. Now it will be hard for one to live alone." Then she consoled Christine, "Our hearts are crying for her, and undoubtedly your feeling will be more intense. My child, what a wonderful person Sister Nivedita was. So many people are now crying for her." One day the mother was resting on her bed and several women devotees were near her. Someone began to talk about Jesus Christ. Now, mother did not know anything about Jesus Christ. At least Sri Ramakrishna must have seen Englishmen and a few Indian Christians, One Indian Christian used to come. He used to wear a Garua cloth below and outwardly had a Christian. There were many interesting incidents where newly converted Indians came to see Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna himself had seen some Englishmen. So mother had not perhaps seen a single person who practiced any religion other than her own Hinduism. So how she responds to the teachings of another tradition without knowing anything about her, about that tradition. Someone began to talk about Jesus Christ. The mother got up and saluted Lord Jesus with folded hands. She then said, she must have seen this picture you find, this Madonna picture which actually hung on the walls of Jagannath Malli, who lived very close to the Dakshineshwar temple. She might have seen, but her acquaintance with Christians or Christianity was almost nil, even much less than that of Sri Ramakrishna. So I heard many things about Jesus Christ from Nivedita. So the only person from whom she heard about it was after starting meeting with Western disciples who started coming to Calcutta. Before that, she did not perhaps know any Christian. Nivedita, MacLeod, Bennett and others. Before that, she had not heard about Jesus Christ from anybody. So I heard many things about Jesus Christ from Nivedita. She read many beautiful stories about him to me. Before that, I did not know anything about Jesus. Or Jesus came to deliver people in this world and how much suffering he had to undergo. He joyfully endured all. Despite all those persecutions, he loved people and forgave them unconditionally. His own disciple betrayed him, or they killed him with nails in his hands, feet and chest. In spite of the terrible torture and pain, he ungrudgingly forgave them. He prayed to God to not take offense at what they did. Is it possible for human beings to have such love, power of forbearance and forgiveness? Who can endure this way other than God? God came as Jesus to teach divine love to the people of the world. This without knowing anything about the doctrines of Christianity. So you find from a purely spiritual standpoint, it is possible to appreciate spirituality in any tradition. They may not be able to understand the man-made barriers in the form of institutions, organizations, which are all man-made, institutions. But pure spirituality communicates itself directly. So that's what you find in Mother's teachings and her appreciation of Christianity. Laura, then there's another devotee, Sister Devamata. Laura F. Glenn heard about Vivekananda's lectures in New York and became a great devotee of Vedanta. She edited Swami Vivekananda's inspired talks, which Swamiji delivered at Thousand Island Park and Ellen Waldo recorded. Years later, she became a nun and joined the Vedanta Center of Boston, where she took vows from Swami Paramananda and became Sister Devamata. She wrote a well-known book, Life in Indian Monastery. It's a classic. She visited India in 1909 and met Holy Mother in Calcutta many times. In her book, Days in an Indian Monastery, she wrote her memoirs about Holy Mother. Holy Mother was very fond of Devamata and later dictated many letters to her. Devamata wrote, "We had no common language, but when there was none to interpret us, she spoke that deeper wordless language, and we never failed to understand each other." So this is what you find, this direct communication. So it is said in the Vedic tradition, you find, actually this is one of the mantras which is normally uttered during the Durga Puja as part of the rituals. Antaya Bhuvadinam Anantaya Mukam. In the Rig Veda, it's called Yajur Veda, you find. The language of the finite is words, and the language of the infinite is silence. That's what it means. So, what you find in Holy Mother is this unique, alternate paradigm in spiritual feminism. Because beyond the differences in culture and language and civilizations, there is one point and one level where you can see spirituality unites humanity and with different cultures. So I can quote something from Holy Mother. This is very, very important quotation which I am going to give. Mother's appreciation of Christian rituals, natural humanism and spirituality. So, and in the sweetness of the comprehension, the depth of her sympathy with the resurrection hymns. So, there's an interesting incident where some of the Western disciples happened to meet Holy Mother, and she asked them to recite some hymns. And in the process, in the sweetness of the comprehension and the depth of her sympathy with the resurrection hymns, unimpeded by any foreignness or unfamiliarity in them, we saw revealed for the first time one of the most impressive aspects of the great religious tradition of Sharada Devi. How she naturally understood and connected with some of the ritualistic hymns of Christianity. The same trait came out again and again, and Mother asked my Guru Bhagini and myself to describe to her a European wedding, maybe a Catholic ritual. With much fun and laughter, personating now the Christian Brahmin and again the bride and bridegroom, we complied. But we were neither of us prepared for the effect of the marriage now. So they repeated a vow, and how she without knowing anything about maybe the essential meaning of these vows, she found, well, these vows indicate a higher meaning, the higher implication of the sacrament of marriage, which is the 15th sacrament. You know, how she could communicate. So in the Hindu Vedantic tradition, marriage, the institution of marriage is one of the most sacred sacraments called samskaras. Total there are 40 samskaras, 40, which are reduced to 18 and then to 16. Of the 16, this is the 15th, which is a minimum. The last one is antyeshti, which is death. Now, traditionally, in the ancient Vedic tradition, when you are born, you are to undergo certain rituals, like giving a name and then eating food for the first time. I'm not going to go, these called Shodasha Samskaras, which are minimum. And one of them is the Upanayana, which Upanayana means you are formally introduced to the whole concept of education. Education actually begins before birth, but the formal education of Vedic training begins when you are instructed the essence of Gayatri Mantra. So after that, you are supposed to be fit to study Vedas. Now, when they perform a ritual, which is fire sacrifice, they have to lit a fire. So that fire will be burning in the home, and that from that fire, they will lit the Homa Agni, the fire sacrifice, and that is the beginning of Vedic education. And when you reach the 15th samskara, the marriage ceremony, you have to again lit a fire like this, and when a person dies, the same fire will be used for funeral pyre. For the marriage ceremony, which is one of the most important, that's for householders, So they have to lit this fire, and the husband and wife should sit in front of the fire and should take certain vows and 7 steps. So the Rigveda mantra, 10th mandala, is called Vivaha Suktam. So it is I forgot long back, So it says, Grinnamite Saubhagatvaya Hastam. So it means it is both husband and wife are undertaking on a spiritual journey. So the idea of collective spiritual pilgrimage is the highest meaning given to the whole sacrament. So the wife is called Sahadharmani, who says half of the dharma. Now, mother who knew about the ceremony, she could naturally communicate and connect with the sanctity and sacredness of a similar ritual from a totally different and alien religious tradition. So that's why when these foreigners enacted the Christian wedding, and including the vows, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. That's mean. Till death do us part means we will continue this spiritual pilgrimage till death. This is the vow. So the point is, what I mean to say, mother who understood the sanctity and sacredness of the institution of marriage in Hinduism could fully appreciate the concept of this collective pilgrimage, which is actually the true implication of Christian marriage. When she listened to this, it is for better or worse, for richer and poor, in sickness and in health, till death, we continue this journey till the last days come. Were words that drew exclamations and delight from all about us, but none appreciated them as did the mother. Again and again, she had them repeated to her, and her own words she mentioned, "Oh, the dharmic words, means words which indicate dharma, righteousness, propriety. That's what it is. So you can imagine a woman coming from a very rural background without any formal education. When she assumed herself as a motherhood, not only in the small setting of her own family or anything. Of course, she was not a mother in that sense. Because she was not mother in the biological sense, she was the spiritual mother of the whole universe. So that's the greatness. And that's one of the reasons why she could directly appreciate and connect with the sanctity and sacredness of another tradition of which she knew practically nothing. She had not even heard of it. Now, this is the essence of spirituality. So, spirituality connects and it communicates without the medium of any instrument, not even language. That's the greatness. Again and again, she had them repeated, oh, dharmic word. So, Sister Niveda writes in the well-known book, The Master as I Saw Him. Now, there are many interesting incidents in this life. Swami Nikhilananda described mother's patriotic feeling at this time. Now, mother, there are many aspects about mother. She was the universal mother. On one occasion, she asked some of her disciples to procure good quality clothing which she wanted to give to somebody. And that person was a patriot. And at that time, the Khadi movement was going on. In India, this Gandhi Khadi movement. So Gandhiji designed this unique method. To promote cottage industry. The common people in the villages should be given some job. They should have a job. So Gandhi propagated this Khadi movement and the wheel and all the charka and all that. And so this disciple, who was an ardent patriot and a Gandhian, went and procured this cloth, which was not of high quality. And incidentally, you should know the background. The British effectively destroyed the 2,000-year-old silk industry, weavers industry in India, including they took measures, even they cut off the fingers of the great weavers and farmers of East Bengal, which was Dhaka muslin was one of the most celebrated weaving marvels, textile marvels of the world. And these Benares silk and Kanji silk are mentioned in Shankaracharya's Saundari Lahari, Anand Lahari, all this. That's 8th century AD. Shankaracharya describes the Divine Mother Saraswati as clothed in Benares, Varanasi and Kanchi silk. That is fame of it. The British, what they did, they destroyed this gradually, so that Indians started importing dhotis from Manchester. That was how far they did. So that was the situation. But so far as mother was concerned, there is no distinction between Indian and Englishman. She said, I want some good quality clothes. Don't worry, it was coming from Manchester. Procure. So the disciple had to buy this one. But on another occasion, when mother heard from different sources about some of the atrocities, then she strongly reacted. And reacted not in a very formal way. In her language, she said, when will the English go? When will they leave this country? Formerly, we had spinning mills in every house. People used to make yarn and weave their clothes. There was no scarcity of wearing apparel. The British have ruined the whole thing. So mother, on the one hand, she was so universal. At the same time, she fully recognized the evil of colonial rule and suppression and repression of the exploitation. So she can find, on the one hand, she was the divine mother of the universe. That's how she acted. Because when these American and British ladies went to her room, they felt she was not a stranger. And she was not welcoming, hi, how are you, come on. She didn't say that. She was sitting there in a place with all face covered. Not a very, very conventional way of welcoming guests coming from foreign countries. But they didn't feel it. They felt they were witnessing their mother. So the total and complete intimacy that you feel only in your mother's presence, that total strangers felt in the presence of Holy Mother. That's what you find. So one afternoon, the mother asked a devotee, hello, there was such a great war going on. Why did it stop all of a sudden? The devotee replied, that was she referring to the First World War, which came to an end in 1918 to end. So the devotee replied, Mother, President Woodrow Wilson of America submitted to the peace conference 14 points that brought a truce, a treaty. Each party agreed and this peace was established. The mother asked what those conditions were. So she is referring to the termination of the First World War. The devotee explained not to invade another country, but give mutual respect, give compensation for destruction, and so on. These 14 points some devotees explained to Mother. Holy Mother commented, these are all admirable words, but what they say comes from their lips. It'd be wonderful if those words came from their hearts. So, so what is important to remember here is this appreciation doesn't come from a learned diplomat who has read the treaty points or agreements, but coming from a mother who was only mother in the and nothing less, nothing more. She considered the whole humanity as her children. So out of that, this appreciation comes. That is the uniqueness of this. In the final analysis, a closer look at Sri Sharada Devi's life as well as her invisibility in the discourses of Western feminism suggests that Western feminism has yet to dislodge itself from its European provenance and realize that there are other ways of being a woman. So there are ways in which a woman can achieve parity, if not superiority, over men. Because Shankaracharya writes in his Matru Panchakam and elsewhere also, he writes, we can pay back our indebtedness to everyone, to friend, father, everyone, but we can never pay back our indebtedness to our own mother. So that we find. So mother alone can love her children or anybody in the world without expecting anything in return. So, and it is only a woman who can assume this higher spiritual status of being a mother. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I mentioned this in yesterday's lecture, the beginning itself. The first instruction in Vedic times given to a student who is returning home after education is, you should honor and respect your mother as much as you honor and respect God Himself. Matru Devo Bhava. Other instructions follow, of course. You should be respectful to parents, father, teacher, and others. But then the most important and the first instruction given is, you should be respectful to your mother. This first instruction. That is the very foundation of the sanctity of the institution of family, and also the foundation of all human relationship. The most transcendental and spiritual relationship is mother. That's why in Hindu tradition, yesterday I mentioned this during the discussion, the archetypal divine feminine is the most exalted definition and description of the divine. So there is a Devi Sukta in Rigveda. Aham Rashtri Sangamani Vasunam Chigadushi Prathama Yajnanam. That's how it comes in the middle of it. Aham Rudrebhir Vasubhischarami, like that. Now, Rashtri here means the controller, the inner indweller, the one who regulates, controls and rules if the whole creation sitting within. Sangamani Vasunam Chigadushi Prathama Yajnana. Yajna Pujarhanam, that's what Yajnana means. This mother aspect is the most exalted and the most worshipful dimension of the divine, the archetypal divine feminine. So, when Holy Mother, through her spiritual sadhanas and also from training under Sri Ramakrishna, realized her identity with the divine, the transcendental, the omnipresent and the immanent, then anyone who went to her did not see a woman, they saw their own mother. So that's what happened to McLeod or Sister Nivedita, all these Western women. I was narrating this incident to drive home the idea that beyond language and beyond differences in culture, in traditions, total contradictions in terms of cultural tradition, food habits, etc., there is one point where there is total unity and harmony at a spiritual level. So that's why the Divine Mother idea is the most exalted concept. That's why, the Sharada, the word you find two spellings you find. Sharada and Sarada. You find two spellings. One is pronounced as Sharada, the other is pronounced as Sarada. So Sharada is Sharat Kale Pujida Idi Sharada. This is the definition given to Saraswati, Kali, different feminine concepts. Because the puja, the worship is done during the autumnal season. So because of that, she got the name Sharada. But the higher meaning is Saram Dadadi Iti Sharada. Saram means the meaning, it's literal meaning, meaning spiritual realization, spiritual effulgence, spiritual enlightenment. The one by worshipping whom we get our own spiritual enlightenment. That person is called Sarada, you find here. So, today we didn't have enough time for interaction this morning, so we have got half an hour now, and tomorrow we'll have the concluding session. So you can discuss this subject, discuss in the broader context of Hindu Vedantic tradition of worshipping the divine as the divine feminine icon. Thank you. Namaskar. Now we can have interactions. Yeah. That's it. No question.
Swamiji, I have a question.
Please.
Sister Nivedita, so she insisted on meeting Sharada Devi, or was it Vivekananda who wanted her to meet Sri Sharada Devi? I wasn't clear about that.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. My question is, was it Sister Nivedita who wanted to meet Mother, or was it Swami? So it sounded sort of...
I shall explain this, please. I know I understand. Okay. It's a very interesting question, Actually, when Sister Nivedita expressed her desire to go to India, because she was so inspired by Vivekananda's lecture, which she heard in London, and she was so much impressed by the universality, by the spiritual humanism of Vivekananda's ideas. So she wanted to go to India. And she also heard from Vivekananda the illiteracy, the social and educational backwardness prevailing in India's women folk, especially in Calcutta in those days. So she expressed a desire to go to India and place herself at the service of the women of India. That's the glory and greatness of this lady. And Vivekananda was not very enthusiastic about it. He had his own doubts. Because on the one hand, he had seen Sister Nivedita. she was a very assertive person, assertive in a very positive sense. In a very positive sense. She was very sincere, very honest, a person of great integrity. So Swamiji had great appreciation for these qualities. But he also had his doubts about how she would be able to accommodate herself to the conditions of Calcutta. And to understand, appreciate what I'm saying just now, when she actually started moving about in the city, getting students to, girl students, to join her schools, there was opposition even from the parents of the children. Even the grown-up people were not very enthusiastic about sending their girls for education. The whole idea was so strange and unfamiliar to them, taboo to some people, more the conservative circles. So then you will understand why Vivekananda was so skeptical, not at all enthusiastic about approving her idea of going to India and starting a movement to spread education and awareness among the women folk in Calcutta. But she insisted. Finally, she landed in Calcutta. But Vivekananda thought if mother could understand, accept her, it would be okay. So that was his judgment. If mother could understand her, and she could understand mother, then everything will be fine. And it so happened that when she met mother, mother could understand her and she could understand mother. So actually this is one of the proofs of the fact that God is real, spirituality is real. That was a time when there were separate quarters for English ladies and English gentlemen in the city. Many of the places were mostly settled by English people only. And there was so much of segregation, not the way as it existed in South Africa also, but in that sense, but still there were separate quarters for the British people. And she was a an Irish lady. So when Vivekananda found she could completely accept and understand mother as mother, and mother also could understand and appreciate her, Vivekananda was relieved of all anxiety. Now everything will be fine. That's the reason. Yeah.
Swamiji, this talk this afternoon brings up many thoughts. One is by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who once stated that everyone has been your mother at least once.
Everyone?
Everyone has been your mother at least once.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, with this talk, it brings together the unification of humanity via humanistic spirituality.
Yeah.
There is one element that must be within all of us, if not within the Earth atmosphere, if not within the cosmos, and it has to do with the Shakti.
Yeah.
Now, the upper lip is the Shiva, the lower lip is the Shakti.
Yeah.
So, with a universal unification, north, south, east, west, with our humanity, the Shakti must be there in all of us.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Do you have any comments?
No.
Or Mahashakti too.
Yeah, the Shakti element is present. That's why we have the energy, we have the ability to function, we have the ability to grow in spiritual life. And that's why, Sri Ramakrishna himself says, the Shakti must reveal the supreme truth. Then only the supreme truth will be revealed to us. So our ability to function, to work for our spiritual progress, for the progress of others. And Nivedita was a great devotee of Kali. And she gave a talk in the dictionary in the Calcutta, the old ancient Divine Mother temple, Kali Ghat temple. And there was opposition from conservative people about her attempt to spread education among the girls. So you have to remember, we have traveled a long distance away in the opposite direction from Vedic times. That's what you understand. During the Vedic times, I think as a student of world history, I can tell you, maybe only the ancient Vedic civilization made it mandatory for parents to make arrangement for the religious education of the girls. That's why you find in the Mahabharata, when the eldest of the Pandavas starts wavering, it is the mother who prompts him into action, gives him a sense of his duties and responsibilities. When Yudhishthira became weakened, is a Kundi, his own mother, preached him. So you find some higher Vedantic truths in the Mahabharata. You find so many, hundreds of such characters. But what happened during the later centuries, due to invasions from across the border, especially the advent of barbarians from across the border, especially from Central Asia, who are totally ignorant of education or anything. What happened, there was a lot of threat to the women folk. So as a result of this, a lot of restrictions were imposed on the women folk, which actually is the beginning of what later became the cause of the social and educational backwardness of Indian women folk. So if you read Vivekananda, you find, especially during his travels in India, Swamiji laments on the plight of the women folk in India, and he also talks about the glory of the ancient times and what a long distance we have traveled backward in time and in culture. So you find this happening, Some of the writings of Sister Nivedita became a source of inspiration to men like Gandhi, to many of the social reformers who worked for the emancipation of the women folk, spreading literacy and education among the rural people. Nivedita played a very important role by influencing some of the freedom fighters of India. And one of the reasons why Swami Vivekananda perhaps did not want her to become a nun in the formal sense was he knew this lady is so active and vibrant and so spirited that she will give talks through writings and lectures. She will inspire the political leaders and freedom fighters. So it's not appropriate for somebody who is a nun to engage in that kind of activities. That's one of the reasons why Swami Vivekananda himself didn't want her to become a nun in the formal, conventional manner.
In part two is, what is the Vedantic view of the global situation with the pathology of war, destroying our mothers, our sisters, and our daughters, with the excuse of exploitation, with the excuse of control? It seems so mindless that daily, whether we read newspapers or watch television or other publications or the internet or wherever the case may be, this seems so mindless, so pathological. Do you see any sort of resolution for this misled, misguided internationalism?
We should have more people attending retreat programs like this, so that more people will be fired with these great ideas, and especially the thought leaders of the nation, the policy makers. If such people can be inspired by these great ideas. There were some leaders, political leaders, even the United States, who had who bear the influence, the marks of influence of Vedanta, which I'm not expected to give their names right now. But there were people who quote Gandhi, who quote Vivekananda frequently, which means at least they have read about them a little. So, which means they have made a mark in there, as marks of influence you find. So the only way we can make some effort to solve the problem you referred to is by increasing the number of people who attend these programs, to spread these great ideas among increasing number of people. thoughts. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, Swamiji. I will try to, I have couple of questions. I will try to, bunch into one.
Yeah.
Like, one is, we hear a lot about grace, right?
About?
Grace.
Grace, yeah.
Grace coming from it.
Yeah.
But grace won't come unless, you have an inner perfection.
Yeah.
And what about, Gyan, Brahma knowledge will also not come unless the mind is pure.
Yeah.
To achieve these, actually you will have to have, do a lot of work,
Yeah.
right? And so I think, this karma yoga as propagated by Krishna and
Yeah.
Buddha and Shankaracharya by his life, work, and Sai Vivekananda, is all like you have to do a lot of work to get to a higher.
Yeah.
But what is happening not only in India and everywhere, what I see, the work is getting corrupted work,
Yeah.
and bad people getting into driving things
Yeah.
down. So what is happening with all the avatars? There should be some upliftment
keeping
and
quiet somewhere?
more work, right?
Yeah.
More work has to be done in the proper way. Way.
Yeah, right.
So what are your comments?
In fact, we had long, elaborate discussions on the harmony of human effort and God's grace. Yesterday, in 2 sessions, we have long discussions on this subject. Now we are coming to the subject you mentioned, If you look at the history of the world, there was never a time when there was zero problem. Everything was wonderful. So, you refer to any era of the history of human civilization. When Rama was living, then also there was a big, Ravana was a big problem. When Krishna was living, Kamsa was a big problem. When Christ was living, you don't want to exchange your life with Christ. So the great Christ himself had his own problems, big problems. And Buddha, he didn't find life a bed of roses. So there was not one period in human history when there was no problem. So, and in every era, in every age, there were also a good number of right-thinking people who gathered like this, who discussed great ideas, and they preserved this ancient tradition, this light of human civilization in their own way. That also you find. So that's what the totality of good and evil more or less remains the same throughout human history. Only it could change its external forms and expressions and manifestations. But the problem of evil it was always there, one way or other. So as I mentioned, what we can do, we should increase the number of people who become aware of this and who think differently, who rather would like to practice and preach something that is universal, good for the whole humanity, not only good for one country or one nation, something good for the whole humanity. So the number of people who think along these lines should increase. That's all we can do about it. We mentioned Karma Yoga is the beginning, the natural first step in spiritual evolution. We discussed this very elaborately yesterday. In 2 sessions, we discussed this subject. You can, after a few days, they will put in YouTube. You can, yeah. We discussed it very elaborately, actually. Yeah.
Catch up with the YouTube.
Yeah. Because for many of them, it will be just a repetition, So it is unfair for me to. Yeah. Okay, please let me know if you don't get the link. You can always request of Vedanta Society, somebody like many of our devotees or Vedanandaji or Peter, they will give you the link. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I had a question about sarada, when
Yeah.
you were speaking sharada and then sarada.
Yeah.
And you were saying it means to obtain spiritual enlightenment by worshipping the divine? Is it the divine? Is it the guru? And then you obtain spiritual enlightenment by worshiping. Is that what you meant? Is that what that means? Or could you tell me more?
The divine mother is conceived to be the giver of the supreme spiritual enlightenment. That's the meaning of Sarada, Sarada, Saram Dadati. Saram means meaning, spiritual enlightenment, the essence. It's the one who gives the spiritual enlightenment is Sarada. The other one is Sharada, because in the autumn season they worship the Divine Mother in many parts of India. So the name stuck, Sharada, means the one who is worshipped in Sharat Kala, means autumn season, autumnal season, autumnal season. And that would be Saraswati in many places, Divine Mother is worshipped as Saraswati. In some places as Kali, in some places as Durga. But there are variations. You don't find the same identical form of worship all over India. It changes from the one geographical region to another geographical region. Right. Yeah.
So the divine feminine.
At the divine feminine. Yeah. The divine feminine. Who is, one important aspect is, she is the giver of not only spiritual illumination, she also the distributor of secular prosperity. So the meaning is bhakti mukti pradayini. Bhakti means bhakti, bhukti, mukti, three. Bhakti means devotion, mukti means liberation, bhukti means secular enjoyment. So those who are poor, they worship the Divine Mother. Mother fulfills their prayers for wealth, eradicates their poverty or backwardness. Those who don't care for the secular things, they worship for higher renunciation or spiritual enlightenment, they get that. So whatever you ask for, Mother gives. And this is one of the unique aspects of Mother worship. And you find in Holy Mother's life, sometimes they came to Mother and prayed for solution to some of the domestic problems. So Mother will bless them, but will tell you go and pray. And they found that it really worked. So, and frequently devotees also prayed for spiritual illumination. That also they got. So Mother is a person who will give you whatever you ask. And that is, even in ordinary life also, Father or others may not give you readily whatever you ask for, but Mother will give readily. So that aspect is given a spiritual orientation in this worship of the Divine Mother aspect. Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, please come, please.
This might not be an appropriate question,
Yeah,
but
please.
I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
Because when I read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and he's always referring to women and gold, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So every time I read that, I
Yeah.
kind of get this in my stomach.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the concept of women and
And, yeah.
mother.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit
I should
about
say,
that?
this is an English translation of an old Sanskrit metaphor. It's called Kamini Kanchana. So actually, there are certain words which do not imply what the word means in dictionary. There are different ways of interpreting words in Sanskrit. So if I give an elaborate interpretation, you can remove your doubt once for all, because it's a very dangerous doubt. Because I've been asked this question again and again in the Gospel. So Kamini Kanchana is a Sanskrit word. Literally it implies desire for worldly pleasures and also greed for wealth. That's what it means in generally speaking. Now, these words, to fully understand, you should know a little about the Sanskrit hermeneutics. It's called in Sanskrit Vyakhyana Shastram, the science of interpreting scriptures, language and words. So, one way of interpreting a word is to give it what it really implies. that is called pratyaksha vritti, means what it openly, obviously what it means. It may not, because that meaning is a conventional meaning. It's called a rudhi in another word. Certain words accumulate a meaning, a significance by conventional usage in different societies. And sometimes words change their meaning also. So this is one. Another kind of meaning is that real implication may not have anything to do with what that word literally means. Totally different, or a modification, or maybe even just the opposite. Here, it is some kind of a conventional metaphor. So a metaphor or a figure of speech can say something about what those words indicate, and frequently could be totally different also. So Kanchana means gold. That's meaning. Now, you should not have any desire for gold, but you should have a desire for the checkbook or a will. It is not different from desire for gold. So it means, generally speaking, extreme obsession, attachment to wealth, worldly possessions, etc. The other meaning is the natural human biological desires, which you find in women and also in men, both you find, which stand in the way of higher spiritual evolution. If you read the autobiographical writings of Saint Teresa of Avila, you find her great spiritual autobiographical writings, what a profound, how she evolved, became such a great saint. So you find this, Brother Lawrence, her presence of God, all you find Philokalia writings, all the examples you find, a lot of autobiographical element which graphically describes the journey of a soul from one level of spiritual evolution to another higher level of spiritual evolution. At this stage, one should keep away from certain obstacles which can stand in our way of spiritual life. This could happen to men as well as women, and women as well as men. It could happen to everyone. So, but in Sanskrit, by traditional usage, conventional usage, the word is Kamini Kanchana. So it doesn't really have anything to do with gold assets or women assets. That's what it is. It is only metaphor. You may find many such metaphors in different language traditions. European language, Latin and Greek, which I am not familiar with. You may come across many such expressions which have only the value of a metaphor or a figure of speech. It should not be taken literally at all.
So, give me a phrase.
Yeah.
So I can put that in my head.
In that case, what we can say, we can say greed and desire.
Greed and lust.
Yes.
Greed and lust. Lust may be an unpleasant word. So maybe greed and desire.
Okay. Greed.
The greed and all this, because frequently, even the old writings you find, a man doesn't live with bread alone. Does it mean that woman lives with bread alone?
Yeah, right.
So it means the whole humanity, what it means.
I get
So,
that.
if you read King James Bible, you always find man is mentioned, never woman. But it's an evolution of language, It's only metaphor, it's symbol actually. It's just a symbol. Yeah.
The perpetuity of humanity.
Yeah.
The samsara and the desire for family and that has to be there, right?
Yeah. What it implies is too much of obsessive attachment.
Yeah, obsessive.
Yeah. Say raga and dvesha, the raga is mentioned. Raga, very often literal translation may not give the full implied meaning. And you cannot write a paragraph to translate one word. So very often when we learn scriptures from the traditional teachers, they will give what exactly the word signifies. Then you will have no doubt. That's why very often many of these scriptures are studied and taught as part of thousands of years of what you call teacher, student, and their student, this succession, Guru Sishya Prachishya Parampara. It's almost like, you see Western music, for example, how it was preserved, ancient tribe from the ancient German masters or Italian or French masters, how music was preserved by great teachers who learned from their teachers. You find this. So like that, many of these words can be properly understood when we read scriptures or when we have to discuss with traditional teachers. That is a safer way of learning. Literal translations naturally cannot do full justice to any technical work. Yeah. I can give an example, then I should conclude. I have seen the vernacular translations of Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason in the Indian vernacular. Absolutely, totally misleading, horrifying. That's because they cannot reproduce what that exact German word really signified. Maybe English language can do much better than Indian vernacular. Like the Indian vernaculars may be able to express many of these Sanskrit words more accurately than Western languages. So this problem of language is always there. Please.
I just wanted to go back for a minute to the question about the world and our response to it. I was thinking about a place where William James says that through prayer, we can affect an actual change in the environment, in the world. It's not easy, but it can be done, and it has been done, as we've talked about, by the great mystics and sages. And I thought of that wonderful statement, I think it's in James in the New Testament. He says, "The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much." Now, I'd put in a woman there too, but the effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous person availeth much. And so I think that, by using these wonderful sacred texts that we have in the Upanishads, we have the means to help change consciousness in the world, and that we're not in any way ineffective by turning to spiritual means to effect a transformation in the world. And I thought, this morning we were talking so beautifully about Guru Chandra Ghosh, and what a wonderful man. And that he gave the power of attorney, or Ramakrishna said, "Give me the power of attorney over your life." And I thought, in a way, we can do the same thing today, because we still have Ramakrishna as a spiritual guide and savior, and we have and we have God to turn to, or spirit. And so what we could do is to give the power of attorney over to the presence of spirit. And just try to do that more and more. The power of attorney over this world that seems so in need. Anyway, that just kind of stood out to me, that we can be like Chandra Ghosh.
The sincere prayers of a few high-spirited souls will have the effect. Look at the transcendentalism. A few people gathered, and is Emerson going and speaking, a tiny group. And we still read Thoreau, Whitman, Emerson, and they are still alive. But it was not a huge assembly where tens of thousands of people but it was a tiny group assembling somewhere, talking about higher things. And he started speaking about Gita, the teachings of Gita. And today we still remember these great men and great women also. So you should remember. So sincere prayers of a small, tiny group will always find fulfillment. It may take some time, but it never go in vain. We shall conclude, because already time. We have other. Tomorrow we do. Yeah,
I was
yeah.
reading in one place,
Yeah.
and the development curve of humanity
Yeah.
is always going up.
Yeah.
If we study the history.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, there always had been problems.
Yeah.
But the development curve is a curve going upward.
Yeah.
Not downward.
Yeah.
It's progressing in the right direction.
Yeah, it is in technology and science move forward, and culture and civilization walk backward. You find a backward movement also. In certain areas, you can find we walk backward. Civilization starts walking backward. So that should be rectified. So, okay, we shall conclude. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.